Kingdom of Kush, the African empire Egypt feared. Long ago, before the huge stone pyramids of Egypt reached into the sky and before the famous names of pharaohs were carved deep into rock, a different people were already living and building along the Nile River far to the south. This land is known today as Sudan, but thousands of years ago it was called Nubia by its neighbors. The people themselves built a mighty African kingdom that history remembers as the Kingdom of Kush. Their story is one of rivers and deserts, of trade and war, of proud queens and brave kings. It begins with the Nile, the great river that gave life to the dry lands of the East African desert. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile more than 4,000 years ago. The sun is hot, the air dry, and endless golden sands stretch toward the horizon. Yet right next to the river the land is green. Tall grasses sway in the wind, and small trees give shade to cattle herders and fishermen. Every year the Nile floods, leaving rich black soil that makes crops grow. Without this river there would be no life here, but with it the land is alive. People build small villages, raise animals, and trade with travelers moving along the water. They also find gold glittering in the hills, ivory from elephant tusks, and dark ebony wood in the forests beyond. Traders from the north and from the heart of Africa meet here, exchanging goods and ideas. From the beginning, Nubia is a crossroads, a place where Africa and the Mediterranean world meet. North of Nubia lies Egypt, another land made rich by the Nile. Egypt and Nubia are close neighbors. Sometimes they are friends and trade partners, and sometimes they are rivals. The Egyptians want the gold, ivory, and other treasures of Nubia. The Nubians want the fine goods of Egypt and the chance to trade farther north. They borrow from each other's art, religion, and language. Over many centuries they will fight, trade, marry, and learn from one another. As early as 2500 BC, Nubian cultures grew strong. They raised cattle, built towns, and worked with stone and pottery. Archaeologists call some of these early groups the A group and C group cultures. Out of these people a true kingdom slowly began to form. Around 2000 BC, when Egypt was going through a time of weakness, Nubian leaders grew powerful. They built a strong state centered at a city called Kerma. Kerma sat near the third cataract of the Nile, a rocky area where the river becomes hard to sail, making it a perfect place to control trade. Huge mud brick buildings rose here, some so large they amazed early explorers. The kings of Kerma were not small village chiefs, they ruled a wide land, sent armies into battle, and grew rich from trade. They buried their dead with gold, fine pottery, and objects from faraway places. Kerma was the first great Nubian kingdom and the first stage of the Kingdom of Kush. But Egypt was never content to leave Nubia alone. Around 1500 BC, during the time of the New Kingdom pharaohs, Egypt sent armies south. The Egyptians wanted the gold mines of Nubia and control of trade routes that reached deep into Africa. Pharaohs like Thutmose I and Ramses II built forts and temples and turned Nubia into an Egyptian colony. For hundreds of years Egypt ruled the region. Temples to Egyptian gods appeared, and officials wrote in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Many Nubians served as soldiers in the Egyptian army or learned Egyptian ways of government. Yet even during this long occupation, the Nubian people kept their own traditions. They continued their music, their dances, and their African beliefs. They blended Egyptian art with their own styles, creating something new and unique. They watched, learned, and waited. By around 1100 BCE, Egypt began to grow weak again. Farther south, the Nubian people came together and formed a new, independent kingdom. Historians call this later Kingdom Kush, and its capital city was Napata, near a holy mountain known as Jebel Barkal. The kings of Napata saw themselves as chosen by the god Ammonius, a powerful Egyptian deity, but they worshipped him in their own way. They built tall stone temples and buried their kings beneath small, steep pyramids that still stand today. They wore fine robes and gold jewelry and grew strong once more. In the 700s BC, a bold Kushite king named Pi decided that his people could do more than rule Nubia. Egypt was weak and divided, with many small rulers fighting each other. Pi led his army northward along the Nile. City after city fell to him. By around 730 BC, he claimed the double crown of Egypt and Nubia. For nearly 100 years, his family, the so-called Black Pharaohs, ruled both lands. These Kushite pharaohs, including kings named Shabaka, Shabiku, and Taharka, repaired old temples, built new monuments, and brought new energy to Egypt. They showed that power could flow from south to north along the Nile, not just the other way around. One of the most famous of these rulers was Taharka, who built great projects and defended his lands against invaders from the east. But strong enemies eventually came. The Assyrians from Mesopotamia invaded Egypt, and the Kushite kings were forced to retreat back to their homeland. Still, their time as rulers of Egypt left a lasting mark and proved the strength of Kush. After leaving Egypt, the kings of Kush moved their capital farther south to a city called Meroe. This move marked a new golden age. From about 300 BC to 350 CE, Meroe became a thriving center of power, trade, and culture. Unlike Egypt's stone cities, Meroe bustled with brick palaces, busy markets, and workshops full of skilled workers. One of the reasons Meroe grew so strong was iron. The people of Kush learned to smelt iron ore and make strong tools and weapons. Blacksmiths burned wood to make charcoal, feeding great furnaces that glowed red in the night. This iron helped farmers plow their fields and soldiers defend their kingdom. Traders carried these goods across Africa and beyond, making Meroe a key stop in the trade routes that linked Central Africa, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean world. During the Meroitic period, Kush developed its own unique culture. The people created a new form of writing called the Meroitic script, which was different from Egyptian hieroglyphs and shows that they no longer needed to copy their northern neighbors. They built hundreds of tall, narrow pyramids for their kings and queens, more pyramids than Egypt itself. Their art mixed African and Mediterranean styles. Statues of rams and lions guarded temples, and paintings showed royals wearing heavy jewelry and bright robes. One of the most remarkable parts of Meroitic Kush was the power of women. Queens, known by the title Candake or Candace, often ruled as regents for young kings or even as full rulers in their own right. Ancient writers from Greece and Rome speak with awe of these powerful queens. One of the most famous was Queen Amanirenas. In the 1st century BC, the Roman Empire tried to expand south from Egypt into Nubia. Amanirenas fought back. She led her army into battle, captured a Roman fortress, and even brought home a statue of the emperor's head as a trophy. After years of fighting, she signed a peace treaty with Rome that kept Kush free and independent. The Romans themselves admitted her courage and leadership. Kush was also a land of rich religion. The old Egyptian god Ammonius remained important, but local gods like Apidmak, a lion-headed war god, became central to worship. Priests led colorful festivals, music filled the air, and dancers honored the gods. Caravans came from the south with gold, ivory, and animals, while merchants from Arabia and India arrived by sea with perfumes, spices, and fine goods. Meroe was a city alive with trade and celebration. But no kingdom lasts forever. Over time, the forests near Meroe grew thin because so much wood was used to make charcoal for iron smelting. Trade routes changed as merchants began to use paths that no longer passed through Kush. A powerful new kingdom rose in the highlands to the east, Aksum, in what is now Ethiopia. Around 350 CE, the Aksumite king Izana led his armies into Kush and captured Meroe. Slowly, the great kingdom faded. Yet the Nubian people did not disappear. They continued to live along the Nile, later building new Christian and then Islamic kingdoms. Their culture, language, and traditions carried on for many centuries. Today, the land of ancient Kush lies mostly within the country of Sudan. In its dry deserts stand hundreds of sharp, narrow pyramids, more than 200 in all, more than in all of Egypt. Many still rise proudly above the sand, silent witnesses to a rich and powerful past. They remind us that Africa was home to mighty civilizations long before modern times, civilizations that traded across continents, developed their own writing, and built great monuments. If you visit the quiet ruins of Meroe and listen to the desert wind, you might imagine the clang of blacksmiths' hammers on iron, the songs of merchants selling gold and ivory, and the voices of queens and kings giving orders. The kingdom of Kush was more than a neighbor to Egypt. It was a center of trade, culture, and power that lasted for thousands of years. It proved that greatness could rise anywhere people were willing to build, to fight, and to dream. Though centuries have passed since the fall of Meroe, the story of Kush still speaks today. It tells us that Africa's history is long, rich, and filled with achievement. It reminds us that women as well as men have shaped nations, that cultures can learn from neighbors yet keep their own identity, and that strength and creativity can grow even in the harshest desert. The Kingdom of Kush was a shining chapter in the human story, a place where the Nile's life-giving waters nourished not only crops and animals but also ideas, art, and the hopes of a proud people. Their legacy remains written in stone, in sand, and in the memory of the world.